Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Skip Reimer, Executive Director of Programs and Communications here at the Institute, and I'm going to do a quick intro here and just to kind of give you a flavor of sometimes how things happen here at Global Conference. People ask me, what made you think of that panel? So I was having a conversation with Jay Rosser, my good friend Jay, who works with Boone, and he said, well, I see you have Karen House there. She's an expert on Saudi Arabia. And I said, yes. And he said, well, you know, Boone likes talking about Saudi Arabia and the oil and all that. And I said, what if we just have a conversation with him? We all said, that's a good idea. And we checked with Karen and Boone. They both thought it was a great idea. So that's how we got here. That's the kind of thing we have at Global Conference. So it is my pleasure to introduce one of the great experts, philanthropists, investors, oil people in the world, Boone Pickens, and Karen House, one of the leading experts on Saudi Arabia, former publisher of the Wall Street Journal. So please welcome Karen House and Boone Pickens.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Boone and I have a good bit in common. We're from small towns in Texas and Oklahoma, about 100 miles from each other. Neither of us will be able, we both retained our accents, so if you can't understand it, neither of us will be able to translate for the other. We have some significant dissimilarities. As Skip said, he's been a very successful oil man and takeover artist, and thus is a true billionaire. The closest I've ever come to billionaires is spending 35 years going to Saudi Arabia and talking to people. So I've lived it vicariously. He's actually produced it.
I'm not in the class with those guys.
Almost no one's in the class with the Saudi riches. What we want to do is conduct a dialogue on Saudi Arabia. I mean, he's obviously the oil expert here, and I've spent the last 35 years going there, first as a reporter, and then in the last 6 years since I retired as publisher, intensively going all over the country, talking to all kinds of people, trying to understand Saudi society and what that says about Saudi stability going forward. So those are the range of things we want to talk about today. And I think maybe we'll start with something that's been in the news, if it's all right with you.
Sure. You're talking about recently, like
yes,
yesterday.
Yes.
Yeah.
Prince Turki, who was the Saudi ambassador to this country, made a speech at Harvard in which he said that Saudi Arabia is going to raise its production capability from 12.5 to 15 million barrels a day. And then the oil minister corrected him and said that it's 12.5. So I'm interested in what you think about the Saudi production capability and their ability to control oil prices and production levels.
Well, Karen, those two statements are interesting to me. The first thing you might say, if it was the United States, to keep people. But one thing, we don't have an energy policy in America, so we don't have people talking about energy. But if you did have here, you would wonder, are they in communication with each other? Mm-hmm. For one to say 15 million, and shortly, hours later, the Minister of Energy says, no, it's 12.5. You think, gosh, what a unusual statement for the 15 million. So I don't know whether they were trying to send a message on the 15 million. I don't think they can do it. I don't
either. I think that's what's significant is that the Saudis are losing their ability to set global production and global oil prices because they have created such a welfare state, and to keep people happy, they have enormous government spending, and that government spending now requires about a $70, $80 a barrel price, and that price is only going to rise.
There's a risk when they decide to cut production you've got to have a corresponding increase, cut supply, increase price. You know, they go hand in hand. It's whether you have that much control over the market or not. But they have cut production in the last year. They've cut production 800,000 barrels a day. And I think, I don't believe they can do but 10 million. They talk about 12 and a half and all, and that.
You don't believe they can produce that much?
I don't think
the
they can.
demand will be that much?
I don't think that they have, I don't think they can bring the production much above 10 million barrels a day. I think that's about it. When you see them 10.1, 10.2, I think they're maxing out at that point.
Can we put up the slide? You all did some very good slides. One of them shows the production, the claimed Saudi oil reserves. Slide 1, yeah, there it is. I mean, I note in my book that when the U.S. ran the Saudi oil company.
Can we get that on here?
Yeah, can we see it, the slide on the one we look at? There you go.
Good.
That in 1977, the Americans said that Saudi Arabia had 100 billion barrels of reserves. When the Saudis took over Aramco in 1980, they, by 82, had raised that number from 100 to 160, and then they raised it another 100 in the late 1980s.
That was because of quotas.
Yeah, and explain that, because that, I think, is very
Oh.
interesting, that nothing had changed that anybody knew, but they have raised their reserve number by 150%.
They did that because quotas were set for OPEC, and quotas were set off of reserves. So they raise your reserves and you get a bigger quota. So everybody almost doubled the reserves, not double, but 150%, you said. Mm-hmm. Yeah, all the OPEC members, the 13 members, all increased their reserves equally, which was crazy. I mean, and they called them paper barrels, didn't pay much attention to, just all at once everybody's reserves go up 150%. But that was in, that was 1990. Is when they went, that big jump right there is when they did it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but look what happened thereafter. After a few years, everybody accepted it if they were legitimate,
right.
Reserves. So you don't know for sure what any of them have in there is in the reserve package, and they won't let anybody audit or anything. Audits, they use the word audit, but I don't like it for what we're talking about here. They don't put out any reserve estimates by third parties or anything else like oil.
There's no verification.
No, good, verification for it, but now it's just accepted that they have 250 billion barrels of oil. And see, there's no decline. It's just flat out there. So this geologist, I would be real surprised if they had 250. I'd be surprised if they had 200 billion barrels.
Really?
Yeah, but that's just gut feeling and a lot of experience.
The thing that interests me is that as this issue of how much oil do they have is on the table, that there is also the issue of growing American self-sufficiency in energy, natural gas mostly. And beyond that, at least in my view, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is undergoing an enormous amount of change. Not that's so visible as in women shedding their black robes or anything, but having all of the pillars of stability in that country, oil wealth, the religious establishment, and the Al Saud family, all, in my view at least, undergoing, facing some significant cracks. We're discussing the oil crack, but the
But look at the age of that crowd.
Yeah, that's the royal family crap.
Right.
Is that you know, this band of brothers that has ruled the country since their father died in 1953. He had 44 sons by 22 wives, and the monarchy has gone from brother to brother, but now they are dying with rapidity. King Abdullah is 90 and he's already outlived 2 crown princes. His current one is said to have Alzheimer's. I don't know. When I met him, he seemed all right. And the designated man in waiting, the youngest of these brothers, is 67. So as Ronald Reagan said about the old Soviet Union in the 80s, they keep dying on me. That's what's going to happen in Saudi Arabia over the next half dozen to dozen years, I think, is that the leadership is going to keep dying, and they have so many branches of the family, they have not been able to agree on which branch gets to run things next, and no one, why should his son get it and my son not, or his son. So there's going to be, I think, a lot of, it's less a monarchy now than a corporation with a bunch of competing entities in it.
Can you imagine 22 wives?
He didn't have them all at once, but...
I don't care. Sir James Goldsmith, you remember Jimmy Goldsmith? It was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Jimmy had 3 wives, you remember, one in Paris, one in London, and one in New York. And in October every year, they brought the 3 wives together.
Extended family, yeah.
And so that all the children would know their brothers and sisters. And there were 10 children. And it was a long article in the New York Times on a Sunday, and I was in New York, and I had a meeting with Jimmy the next morning, breakfast meeting at Brownstone, 16,000 square feet. Is where he had all of them for 30 days, 3 wives, 10 children, all there together. And
very Saudi.
And so I sat down at breakfast with him. I said, Jimmy, I got one question. Yes, I said, that article Sunday about your 3 wives and 10 children are here for 30 days together. I said, how exactly do you do that? And he looked at me like I was a fool. He said, Boone, you know how you do it. You do it with money.
That's actually a very good answer. I think
he gave me the right answer.
That is how the Saudis do it with money. Can we also look at the other point that we've discussed that I think would be interesting if it's, slide 4. One of the facts about Saudi Arabia is that people do not pay taxes. The government is entirely funded by oil wealth. So you see this very close alignment between per capita oil revenue and GDP. And in a country of 26 million people, nearly a third of them are foreigners. And it is those foreigners that do all the work. 90% of the employees in the private sector are foreigners. So Saudis either work for the government or, as you said, have to be paid not to work.
Well, they've got a blueprint now of how to overthrow. I mean, they saw it Egypt, Libya, and that blueprint's well known. You get several thousand people and a pile of rocks is the way you start off, and start throwing the rocks, not at each other. Yeah, they all throw in the same direction. And but then see if you can pick up somebody with a gun. And then the thing snowballs on you, and all at once now we have, the United States can't figure out who it is that started the whole thing. And so we sometimes are for the guy in the street, and then we get confused because that is that's the brotherhood, And, you know, it's I have a solution for, okay.
Good, because
that-
our government thinks there's no reason to worry about Saudi Arabia, that everything's stable as can be.
Well, to me, it just, I mean, set the table, and what you have is 17 million barrels of oil coming out of the Straits of Hormuz every day, and of the 17 million, we get about 10% of it, a little more than 10%. But we have the Fifth Fleet in there. Now, if I might just go off for 15 seconds here, they're only in the world, all nations, there are only 11 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers. And they all belong to us. Nobody else has one. Now, first thing somebody said, China does. China's still trying to refit a Russian, a really bad job they did on an aircraft carrier. The Chinese bought it, they're gonna refit it. It still is not operative. But 11, and we have them all. Now here we are in our Fifth Fleet we have the way, I was corrected the other day by the Secretary of Navy. He said, you are saying we have 4 carriers in the Persian Gulf. And I said, okay, correct me, what do we have? And he said, we have 2 carriers in the Persian Gulf. And I said, well, where are the other 2? He said, they're outside the theater line. Okay, we have 2 in the Persian Gulf and 2 almost in the Persian Gulf is what we have. But here we are protecting 17 million barrels of oil every day, and we get 10% of it. So I said, why are we there? I don't get it. And so, well, we have to have a footprint there. Well, a footprint to date, to me, has cost us 7,000 lives and 30,000 people injured, and $1.7 trillion. That's what the footprints cost. To protect oil for who? The 15. Exactly. Chinese. Either they're very good salesmen or we're not very smart. But to get us to put the Fifth Fleet over there, to keep 15 million barrels flowing out of there to them, some of it goes to Europe, but most of it to China. And
I think more Americans are going to begin to understand that as the whole discussion of energy self-sufficiency occurs, and as they have tired of unsuccessful wars in the Middle East. We've shown the limits of war, and I think we have seen the limits of diplomacy with our inability to really control or guide any of these uprisings.
well, Obama, you remember when he was campaigning, it was going to be somewhat easy. We'll just negotiate with them. You remember with the Iranians?
Right, and the Iranians don't want to negotiate.
No, I mean...
And the Syrians don't want to negotiate.
No, and get the hell out of there, what I'd do. But if we announce that we don't need the 1,700,000 barrels of oil out of the Persian Gulf every day, and we now have an option, which is a huge military option, probably, I'm guessing it'd be between $100 and $200 billion you could save to pull out of there. And
I think it's closer to 100 billion, but that may be a low ball.
well, but it's a big number.
But it's,
Yeah,
as
plus-
whoever it was said, $1 billion here and $1 billion there soon adds up.
Yeah.
100 billion here and there adds up.
But the people lost is a huge factor there, and the money that we've spent in the area. And when we leave, everybody's going to hate us.
Now,
So exactly what did we accomplish?
This is another thing that concerns me, is that by and large, our government, I think old habits die hard. We've been supporting the Saudis since Roosevelt met Ibn Saud in
right.
1945 to get access to oil, and even though it's less necessary, it's still part of the mental psyche, so that the Saudi foreign minister is fond of saying, we used to have a Catholic marriage, America and Saudi Arabia. Now we have a Muslim marriage, meaning that they have several wives, the Chinese, the Russians, the Europeans. And we take this insult when it's actually we who are, they need us more than we need them at this point, I guess is my
Absolutely.
is my point. And we don't have the courage to stand up and not try to force them to be a democracy. I don't think that's the way to get them to change, but to just say what we believe in. We don't really support when they abuse people's human rights. We don't say a word about it because we don't want to upset them.
But look,
and that is going to leave people in that country unhappy with us when the change comes, just like occurred in Iran.
But Washington, the biggest failure in Washington is, to me, is no change. I mean, we just keep doing the same thing over and over. I know, what is it, you're crazy if you do the same thing over and over and expect different results. But that's where just about where we are. And but I'm a change advocate. I think more good comes from change, well thought out change, decisions, and then I think more good will come from those decisions than bad. And Washington will not change those.
Yeah,
but look at Egypt. There we supported a dictator, and now once that thing gets overturned and all, well, the same thing can happen in Saudi Arabia. Mm-hmm. It happened in Iran when we supported the Shah, and people say now, or I've heard them say, well, if we had really supported the Shah, Iran would be much different, like Saudi Arabia. Who in the hell would know? I mean, whether it would be or what would have happened. We don't have any idea. What's done is done. But I don't know. I just don't like the Mideast, and it's not big in the United States as far as energy is concerned. Canada is much more important, and we get almost as much oil from Mexico, 1.5 million barrels a day, as we get from Saudi Arabia. And it's interesting though the how we're connected to the Saudis. It's
yeah, I think if you don't pay close attention, it is important to understand there are people in Saudi Arabia who are doing any number of previously unthinkable things. There was a young woman recently who was wearing red nail polish in a shopping mall, and when the religious police came up to her, she took out her cell phone and said, "You can't harass me." She filmed the entire encounter and put it on YouTube. Saudis now have a way to communicate with each other through social media that the government has had a divide and conquer strategy, certainly for the full existence of this latest Saudi state. And now people are communicating and discovering that they have things in common. They have a way to share thoughts and ideas. Saudis watch 90 million YouTube videos a day, and there are only
they don't work.
19 million of them. They don't work, that's right. They have a lot of time to watch, but it's as my mother used to say, an idle mind is the devil's workshop. They have a lot of...
That's the same thing, but we came from the same district. That's
right.
exactly what my grandmother said. Idle mind, son's the devil's workshop. But just flip over to the United States a little bit, we're getting a lot of people that have a lot of time on their hands to watch same thing the Saudi population is. So it's, I don't know, those are issues I'm not even smart enough to work on. And it's so easy for me to work. I'll be 85 next month, and all I have known is go to work in the morning. And you say, well, what a sad guy. No, it's not a sad guy at all. That's what I want to do. The other day somebody said to me, why don't you retire? I said, what will I do when I retire? I said, all the things you wanted to do all your life that you haven't had time to do, you can then do. You can go anywhere. You've got an airplane. You can do anything you want to. I said, I'm doing exactly what I want to. I'm working. I enjoy working. And so I must have been retired in my whole life. Anyway, but here, let's go over to the United States and make a comparison. That you look at increased production the last 3 years in the world, only the United States has increased production.
And do you think that will be allowed to continue, or will the environmental movement manage to snuff out Keystone, snuff out the oil from shale, and
Well,
or are we
I had
on
a-
a trajectory that will last?
I had a nice talk with Henry Waxman, congressman in California, a couple of years ago, and Henry was telling me how he just not going to allow Fort McMurray, the oil sands in Alberta, to be produced because of the CO2 emissions from that production there. And I said, Henry, Canada doesn't even know who in the hell you are. Congressman from California? Canada's another country. they don't care whether you want CO2 or whatever. I mean, they don't pay any attention to you. And I said, you need to, it's a sovereign country. It's not another state of the United States. And people in the United States kind of feel like Canada's part of the United States. It's not. It's just a very friendly country offering their oil to the United States, the Keystone Pipeline. And it would be somewhat like your neighbor tell you that they wanted to fix your turkey for you for Thanksgiving, and had a beautiful 30-pound turkey, and you knew they could cook, and you said, well, let me think about it for a while, whether I take the turkey or not. Well, that's Keystone Pipeline. I mean, it is Thanksgiving turkey for us. It's for us. And if what's going to happen, the Canadians, I lived in Canada in the 60s, lived in Calgary, and they're proud people, and they're patient people, and they feel kinship to the United States, but they're not fools. And you're either going to take the Keystone Pipeline coming south, or the Keystone Pipeline goes west. And if it goes west, it's headed for China. That's it. Now, how much oil is there? We had the Saudi reserves up there. They claim 250 billion. It's interesting because the oil sands at Fort McMurray, they too, but this is with, you know, you can audit, do the reserves if you want to, and all the information available to you. Not so on Saudi production, but they too have 250 billion barrels. So here you have the same amount of oil the Saudis claim is contiguous to the United States, available to us, offered to us. Well, you know, if I know, you know, in an afternoon, you and I could figure it out. I mean, would you rather have the 250 billion barrels in Canada, or would you rather have, but you aren't getting that from the Saudis, you're only getting a 20% of their production.
Yeah.
So, but we have no energy plan in America, is where you are. And I say it, and I know I have a tendency to annoy some of our people in Washington, but I oftentimes say, nobody argues with me about it. I said, you can't have a 5-minute conversation on energy in Congress, because in 3 minutes you'll run out all they know about energy.
I would say the same thing about Saudi Arabia. You can't have a 3-minute conversation with anybody in Congress or most people in the administration, because they'll run out of what they know.
Sure.
Because most people don't get to go there or spend time, and the assumption is that this is our ally, and women are abused, and they have a lot of oil, and they produce a number of terrorists, and that's about the 3-minute
That's about it.
knowledge level.
They will focus if there's a crisis. If there's a fire, they'll get a fire truck out.
I'm not sure.
They never
We
planned.
have a fire in Syria, and we don't seem to be able to.
No.
To
Well, I don't want them in
focus,
Syria.
but
Let those guys take care of themselves. And there's not much oil in Syria, so you don't. You're in there because the way they're treating their own people.
and you are an advocate, as I understand, of doing away with the Strategic Petroleum Reserve.
Yeah, I don't. That's 40.
What's the point of getting rid of it now that we have it? To help bring down the debt, or why not just leave it there in case you ever need it?
Well, okay. I mean, we started filling up 40 years ago. Yeah.
We also have a slide, excuse me, with the, I think it's 12? Yeah, 12, if somebody can put it up, that just shows what's in the...
There it is. That's Strategic Petroleum Reserve. It's a little over 700 million, maybe. I think it has been up to 750. Well, it hadn't either. It's at the high point, isn't it, right now? But it's been used several times. You've pulled it down. You can go back across there and see where it's been pulled down. But mostly it's for political reasons. It hadn't been
To bring the price down, you
Yeah.
mean, to get somebody reelected.
Yeah, Clinton used it for that purpose. And I think Obama would have used it but didn't need to. I thought they would pull it down, but they didn't. But look at that reserve. It's in there at $24 a barrel. So you could make, say, $70 a barrel on it if you took it out. Well, now let's look at energy independence for America. You have, I think, recoverable gas. This is a real number for you. 4,000 trillion. That's a big damn number. It's not on there. You're looking, it's not
Yeah,
there.
I know, it's
Yeah.
not on here.
But 4,000
I'm
trillion.
digesting 4,000 trillion.
4,000 trillion cubic feet of natural gas is available to the United States. That is about, in barrels of oil equivalent, would be 3 times 250 billion barrels. So 3 times what the Saudis claim they have. And you could take the natural gas, and I had proposed a bill in Congress, which would be it would be that you converted to natural gas and you got about $30,000 tax credit, and that it had to pay for, because just like a toll road, if you used it, you paid for it. So you would pay for it, the ones that were using the natural gas, the truckers, whoever used it. But put that aside just for a second. Just say, we need to get natural gas into transportation fuel in America. So we'll take the 8 million trucks as a trial. There are 250 million vehicles in America. So we'll take the 8 million big 18-wheelers and go to natural gas. Now this is happening. You really don't need government for it, but if you want to do it twice as fast, you can. So you say, all right, what we'll do is we'll sell out of SPR money to fund
that.
Yeah, fund that. And it will be no strain on the budget. And here, when you look at it though, with 750 million barrels, it would take, if you're going to take 400 million barrels out of that, it would take you a long time, or you would impact
The price.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know how long it'll take you to get 400 million barrels out of there without impacting? 10 years.
10 years?
Yeah, 10 years. So here, that actually, we have enough oil in the Strategic Petroleum Reserve that in the event that, for instance, Iran went clear off of production due to some attack that Israel did to them and shut down their country or whatever, you could actually service that for a period of time out of our SPR. Is this an asset? Of course it's an asset. But is it a usable asset? is the question. And I said, well, you said, well, it's already in there, just leave it.
Well,
And-
I like the idea of having some. I was covering energy for the Wall Street Journal when they started the petroleum reserve, but I think the idea of having some ability to look after your needs until we're in a position where natural gas is driving our cars, the rest of our...
I never mention cars because it's somebody says, oh my God, all our cars. No, just let that happen if it happens. But do go
The trucks, yeah.
the trucks. And my model for that is Southern California, that the fuel, California has forced natural gas into transportation there because of air quality. And they had a pretty tough guy, smart guy, and he had money. Was South Coast Air Quality Management District, AQMD, in Southern California. He had air quality issue, Barry Wallerstein. And Wallerstein said, who are my biggest polluters? And said, trash trucks. They idle a lot, and you know, they're parked and they're running all the time. Bad emissions out of it. Take one off the streets worth 325 cars. So he said, okay, we'll have this. How much more does it cost to go from diesel to natural gas trash truck? $50,000. And this was 7 years ago. It's now narrowed to $15,000. But he said, okay, when you sell your diesel trash truck, you have to go with natural gas, and we'll give you a grant of $50,000. They have money. And he wanted to clean up the air, so $50,000. Now 70% of those trucks are on natural gas. And now Waste Management announced 3 weeks ago on CNBC, said that they would, of all the trash trucks they buy this year, Waste Management, 90 to 95% will be on natural gas. So you know that you have a working model to show you exactly what you could do and how fast you could do it. And you could do it with no strain on the economy. In fact, it would create about 600,000 jobs, and directly and indirectly another 1 million jobs. And it would take you off, it would save you out of $400 billion you're spending for foreign oil, it would recover $100 billion on that. So it has all, but you can't get anybody in Washington.
Win-win.
Yeah.
Can we take some questions? I'd be interested in, and you're happy to answer
Sure.
questions, right? There are microphones, I think. There's a gentleman in the back, and then
Yes, Mr. Pickens. Are you familiar with Jim Baca? He was the land commissioner for the state of New Mexico. I recall back in the early 80s, he converted his vehicles to compressed natural gas and attempted to get New Mexico, which has huge reserves, to shift from gasoline to natural gas.
Yes, I remember that.
the gentleman, well, the lady over here.
What I would like to ask you both is that you seem to be you are very well informed about Saudi Arabia, especially questions of succession and the growth or the existence of a strong Islamist pro-Al-Qaeda group in Saudi Arabia who are being kept under control right now. But suppose something like 1979 Iran happens, or the Arab Spring, it explodes in Saudi Arabia. What will happen to all the arms we are selling and offering Saudi Arabia? Wouldn't that create a horrifying picture for us? Because there are members of the Saudi royal family even who support some of these Al-Qaeda type movements. Suppose one of them gets to power. I mean, I don't know. I would like to hear your reactions to such a prospect. We didn't expect the Arab Spring. We didn't expect the Iranian Revolution. So it's possible something like that will also happen. The king is old. Who knows? Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think it's the point I've been trying to make, maybe not effectively, that the assumption it couldn't happen in Saudi Arabia is a naive assumption. As de Tocqueville said, the people who led the French Revolution had no idea they could do it until they had done it. And there are, as you point out, a lot of arms both in the hands of the Saudi Defense Ministry and in the hands of the Saudi National Guard, which is basically to protect the royal family from the Defense Ministry, and in the hands of the Interior Ministry, which is simply now a third armed branch of the Al Saud family. So what a lot of Saudis do worry about, and probably not uselessly, is that these three different armed entities could wind up under the leadership of three different princes who control them, fighting each other and involving religious jihadists, which, as you point out, some members of the royal family clearly do support. So it's a potentially unpleasant brew. And I don't think we have a lot of ability to affect it. And so my view is the American government should be simply, we're not prepared to wash our hands of association.
Are we in a position to do anything? We couldn't do anything about even Mr. Mubarak's downfall.
Yeah, I don't think we have a lot. I mean, I think it is unfortunate that President Obama had a meeting with Mohammed bin Nayef, the prince that runs the interior operation, which is seen as a very repressive ministry internally inside Saudi Arabia. That was, to Saudis, that was an American blessing on their view of who we hope will be their next repressive king. I don't think we have the ability to pick among the royal family. And we will, if we don't just enunciate our principles, we believe in free speech, the ability to critique your country, etc. We are increasingly going to be on the wrong side, because at some point, young Saudis do want, as one of them said, to live inside the country, not just when they're outside the country.
A point on that, those arms, that's a big business for the United States to arm the Saudis. They're paying for all that.
Yeah, that's now, I think, more than oil. Our rationale for the relationship is that we get to sell them a lot of arms. Yes, sir. Oh, sorry. Okay, the gentleman with the microphone. Yeah.
Noel Thompson from Thompson Global. Do you think energy independence in the United States is a way to combat terrorism funding in the Middle East, meaning that as the United States become more energy independent and we become bigger sellers of oil, it's less petrodollars that the Saudis would use to fund terrorist organizations within the Middle East? And also, do you think in the next decade, do the United States and Iran be able to build a closer relationship, as obviously they're the key to the Middle East? And I've traveled to both places, so I would love to hear your response.
Let's focus on petrodollars that get in the hands of the Taliban. And Jim Woolsey and I have talked about this a number of times. Jim, head of CIA, and we were on the same panel yesterday, and we're old pals from Oklahoma. But I think money going, now if Rex Tillerson was sitting here, CEO of Exxon, he and I have talked about this too. He said they have no record of their dollars going into the hands of the Taliban, Exxon's. I said, well, there you go, to the Saudi government, then to the royal family, and then I think that's where it goes. Not because they're trying to hurt us, they're just paying ransom to keep the Taliban off their back. But you don't, independence is if you're trying to cut off money going to terrorists, you don't have to go completely energy independent. All you have to do is focus where the money is going, and we take 4.5 million barrels a day off of OPEC, 1.7 million off the Saudis, and the rest comes from around, Venezuela. I'd cut those birds off tomorrow afternoon, but and Nigeria and other OPEC nations. But 4.5 million barrels a day, we could cover that with good planning in probably a couple of years. We could eliminate all of OPEC if we had a plan, leadership that could take us in that direction. So you could, by cutting off some part of it, you could cut off funding, but you do feel foolish that you're paying for both sides of the war. You maybe don't have exact 100% other side, but you're paying a big part of it because of the oil you purchase from the Saudis.
I think it's hard to see a lot of diminishment in money available to terrorists from Iran or Saudi or any number of places, because there's a dedication by a number of people in those countries, and they're not poor, and they're not likely to be poor in the very short run. So even if we do everything he says, the terrorists will still be able to get funding. What to me is more interesting is, are we willing? I don't think we can defeat terrorism. As Lee Kuan Yew, the Singapore prime minister, ex-prime minister, says, by killing people with drones, you're really killing the worker bees. The queen bees of this are the religious leadership who are safely ensconced in their mosques around preaching hate, and we don't bomb those people. So the Muslims themselves at some point are going to have to decide what kind of world they want to live in. And meanwhile, I think we have to protect ourselves. But I think if Israel were to disappear tomorrow, there would still be terrorists who hate the U.S. It's not because we're supporting Israel. That may be a part of it, but that's not the whole rationale. And if we were to get completely out of the Middle East, I think there would still be people there who would like to do us in. I know that's not the conventional wisdom view, but it is my view, having spent 30 years in that part of the world. Yes, sir.
Which do you think is the more imminent threat? That we run out of fossil fuels and oil that is readily available, or we run out of clean air to breathe?
I didn't hear the last part of the question.
Which is the greater threat, that we run out of fossil fuels that are readily available, or we run out of clean air to breathe?
Interesting. Which one first?
You stumped us both.
Well, you're gonna.
I'm not so worried about clean air myself. Our fossil fuels. I think we've got oil and natural gas. Maybe I'm a naive optimist, but I don't worry about running out. And I'm not. I'm not like Al Gore on the verge of a nervous breakdown about climate change and clean air, because we always seem, as he made the point yesterday, when you make up your mind to do something, we do it quickly. So things can change, and I'm not Malthusian, if you will.
I'd like to cut Al Gore in on a good oil deal and see how he liked it.
I'm sure he would like it. He cut in on the Al Jazeera deal without any problem.
But I don't, when you say cut out fossil fuels, tell me what you're going to use in place of fossil fuel. And, I have people say, wind and solar. Hey, wind and solar are not going to move an 18-wheeler. 70% of all the oil used every day goes to transportation. Wind and solar do nothing for transportation. Am I against them? No. I'm for anything American.
I think Paul Wolfowitz wants to edit his neighbor's question or comment, which is Can somebody give him the microphone just so he can finish?
Just to be clear, this question has nothing to do with Iraq. Paul Wolfowitz. It has something to do with Indonesia, where I was the American ambassador. I don't disagree with what the two of you have said about where terrorist funding will continue to come from no matter what happens to oil prices. But I think you're underestimating the impact of Gulf money, not just Saudi, but Qatar, even worse perhaps, in this whole funding of Wahhabi religious education, which is, to take Indonesia as an example, a country that is not Wahhabi by tradition at all, but if you go to the madrasas that have big gymnasiums and 3-story dormitories, you will find that they're teaching Wahhabi Islam. It's even happening in Fairfax, Virginia, and I think it's a serious problem. Because, as I think you've said, it's the biggest problem is the people who preach the hate, not the foot soldiers who carry out the acts.
Yeah, I think that is.
I agree with you 100%.
Is an enormous problem. What one does about it is harder to figure out. But I think pretending that the Saudis are not participating in this, or the, as you say, the Qataris or others, is naive. The idea that if they won't do it, if we act like we don't know they're doing it, I mean, they are doing it, and they continue to do it. And whether the government is supporting it or not, they don't seem to be able to stop it if they're trying.
Good.
Pardon? They like to say they're not. I mean, people like Mohammed bin Nayef will tell you, you know, this all came from the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. It's not us. It's not us. We're, you know, good, godly people. I'm sorry, this gentleman had a question, and then.
Wait just a second here.
Repeat, we have 4,000 trillion MCF of gas in the United States.
We got this, I'm taking off a JP Morgan report that was done 3 years ago. It was 8,000 trillion in place in the United States and Canada. And they were speculating how much of the in place could you recover. You can't recover 100%, of course, but our technology has advanced in the last several years. Now, that's out of the shale, most of it shale gas, you can recover up to 50% of it. So you're up to 4,000 trillion. Now, GE had a meeting of a few people, and one of our guys was there in Houston 3 weeks ago, and they had an expert that he said it could be as much as 20,000 trillion. So it's 5 times as much as I say it is. It is one hell of a lot of gas. I'm not kidding you. And we will get better on recovery from that in-place number. You'll continue to get better with better and more efficient frac jobs.
And what is that equivalent in oil, barrels of oil?
Well, 4,000 trillion would be about your BTU equivalency is 6 to 1, and so I think that's the number I had. It's about 4 times what the Saudis have in their stated oil of 250 billion. But I would like to comment about the Saudi number of 250 billion in oil reserves. They're now putting on fields, the Saudis are, that were found 30 years ago. Well, that tells me one thing. Those were fields that were not prime fields. They're low gravity, high sulfur fields, high sulfur crude oil, and it's expensive for them to do. And one field was 125,000 barrels a day last year. They won't give you all the numbers, but when they add a field into their overall production base, that they do report those fields coming on at different amounts. But they have, since they jumped that number on the paper barrels, they've produced over 50 billion barrels of oil out of their old fields. And I can tell you that fields, I don't care how good they are, they decline and eventually deplete. And so Gawar is their big field, and I'm told that they are now lifting 18 million barrels of water a day out of Gawar. Is that real?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't get to see it, but I've,
Yeah,
heard
so,
the
I
same.
mean, and what that is, they've got a beautiful reservoir, and the reservoir is a water drive reservoir. And what that means is as you take oil, gas out of the upper part of the reservoir, the pore space is filled with water. And so the water is actually sweeping. It's nature's water flood. And the water replaces the oil in the pore space. Well, when that happens, you're now going to start to produce a lot of water. And 18 million barrels a day of water, they're producing 3 times as much water as they are oil. I don't know whether, I can't say but I know what happens to reservoirs, and that's exactly the way they operate. So,
Well, Boone, with all that natural gas in America, do you think the price will go down, or is it going to continue to rise?
that natural gas?
Yeah, natural gas.
Yeah, what you have now is 1,850 rigs operating in the United States, but only 364 are drilling for natural gas. That means those are dry gas wells that are being drilled, but you will pick up associated gas off of the oil. So out of the 1,850 rigs running, 364 on natural gas, the others will provide some associated natural gas. But these are expensive wells. I mean, you're drilling horizontal wells with multiple frac zones in them, and you are going to have, that's why you only have 364 rigs running. 5 years ago, you had 3 times that many rigs running because you could make money off of natural gas. Today, you are not running enough wells in enough rigs for natural gas in the United States to replace what you're taking out. So you are in decline now on natural gas. It'll come back as soon as the price of natural gas gets to $5. They'll put rigs back to work. $6, they'll put more rigs back to work. So you're going to see a gradual increase in the price of natural gas. But it's not going to be back to the days of $8, $9 natural gas. But let me bring you to a point, and then I'll shut up, that
They're going to shut us both up.
I know it, but okay, point though is that it's 6-to-1 is the BTU parity with oil and natural gas. So $100 oil will get you $16 natural gas. So there's a huge arbitrage here to capitalize on, which is cheap natural gas.
I apologize to the gentleman there who never got to ask the question. And on behalf of both of us, thank you for your attention, and
Thank you.
we enjoyed it.